What's wrong with LinkedIn? Okay, hold up. All right, let's try that again. Oh, oops, it already went. No. All right, we're already live. So here we go. We'll start the countdown again. All right. Well, hey, technical difficulties as always, but we did our little 10-second countdown. Here we are, live Q&A with Jeff Olson and Remax Preferred. We're talking about HUD homes today. So we're going to get through some questions. This is part of our outreach. Let's get right into it, Jeff. Jeff Olson, Remax Preferred, Wisconsin here. What is a HUD home?
HUD home is basically a home that it's an FHA mortgage where someone was obviously not making their payments and it was foreclosed upon. So that's basically what it is, similar to a foreclosure. A lot of people think of it as a bank-owned property foreclosure. So yeah, pretty straightforward. It's a property that's HUD-owned that's going to be sold. So
from that standpoint, little follow-up then, what is HUD?
What is HUD? As far as, so housing and urban development, basically. So HUD is a group that, or I should say, we work with an asset management group that handles the contract for HUD for this area and for a multi-state area. So they're currently the group that handles all the assets in Wisconsin, which, by the way, there are two. In fact, I looked today, and there are 3 active assets in Wisconsin. HUD, that's the least I've ever seen.
Wow. So only 3 like active properties that are HUD owned listed in the whole state of Wisconsin right now?
Active properties that are still on HUD Home Store. So meaning there are probably several that are under contract right now.
Sure, pending to close.
Yes, we have one. So what happens is when a property goes under contract, it drops off of HUD Home Store. So we have one in Janesville right now that's under contract. That one does not appear on HUD Home Store. So there are 3, and none of them are in Dane County. In fact, none of them were anywhere near here. And you know they're still currently active on, so meaning without offers on HUD Home Store. So very, very few assets right now, probably because of the moratorium and so forth, and that may, obviously it should pick up at some point here, which is, I suppose, good news and bad news. But anyway, so interesting little. I was really surprised. Usually there are quite a few assets in the Milwaukee area, but I didn't see any really. They were all in other small areas that I wasn't even really familiar with, so they're a ways from here.
And let's make it really clear to anybody watching this. We're not hoping that people can't afford to keep their home or to be in some sort of a situation. And that's not, just so everybody knows, that's not every situation on why they end up being, taken back from HUD. There's lots of reasons out there. We're not going to get into those right at the moment. But on to our next question then. So HUD being the Housing and Urban Development branch of the federal government. And as Jeff was pointing out, we then work with an asset manager that is kind of that in-between portion between us, the front line, the real estate professional, Jeff, and the property, and then the federal government, which is managing that inventory, basically, right? So
ELB is the name of the group that's handling the assets in this area and in multiple states. So they were awarded the contract here a while back to list the HUD properties here, and then that switched over a few times since I've been listing HUD properties. We've had a couple different ones, but they're the current ones. They're great to work with, very easy to get a hold of, very friendly. Just they do a great job, actually. So
awesome. Yeah, it seems like you guys, from the frontline salespeople, have been really happy with them. So next question for you to keep things rolling: how do we submit contracts, or how do contracts get submitted on HUD homes?
Okay, so basically the bid is placed online. The bid is, so an agent would need to go into HUD Home Store, log in. They would need to place their bid. And then if their bid is accepted, they receive a notification by email that states that the home, your bid has been accepted. Congratulations. Here's what you need to do next. And then typically that agent would, well, not typically, every time, would get a call from myself stating, telling them, hey, your contract's been accepted. Here's the next steps. Do you have any questions? Blah, 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 blah. And then from there, they fill out a checklist online, which they have to upload a couple things like a copy of earnest money and your pre-approval letter, things like that. And then once they get that checklist filled out, then what's really nice about this group, they're doing a little differently than they used to. It's DocuSign, which agents are really familiar with these days. So the next step is that a DocuSign contract is sent out to all the parties in the transaction, which includes the title company and obviously the agents.
And for those out there that don't know what DocuSign is, online signature and identification verification through online means instead of paper and pen and fax. Cool. Awesome. The other question that I have is, let's see, is the title company out of state like bank-owned property sales many times are, or what's the deal on title insurance and title for these HUD homes?
Yeah, so the nice thing is that with HUD, you get to choose, the buyer gets to choose the title company they'd like to use. So you can use Preferred Title or First American Title or Homestead Title, whatever.
Nightberry, Nations, anybody you go to locally, you can use it.
Yep. So a lot of the bank-owned properties that that I work with, a lot of times they're Florida, Milwaukee. They're title companies that we've never heard of that are somewhere hundreds of miles away, and then we're dealing with someone that we're not familiar with, and we're HUD. It's really nice. You just get to choose what title company you want to use. They're local. You go to the closing, at least most of the time. With COVID, maybe not, but as far as depending on what title company you're going to, a lot of them are allowing the agents in, of course, as everybody knows. But yeah, so that's kind of how that works.
That's a good thing to know. I think HUD homes in general, like why we're doing this Q&A is there's some agents that are out there that are uncomfortable with the process. Their clients may be a little uncomfortable because it's not as familiar to their agent. So it's nice to know that at least that piece of it is also not some brand new endeavor that somebody needs to go through. So that's good to know. Another question for you: are the utilities left on in these HUD homes, like the power and water, all that stuff?
Okay, so the way that works is the utilities are typically, a great majority of the time, they're off. So they're shut off if the property's winterized. If it's during the winter, obviously they want to make sure the pipes don't freeze up. Now, occasionally I will get one that will have the utilities still left on. I had one recently in Friendship where they had the electric. Well, it was winterized, but the electricity was left on, the heat was on, which is very unusual. I have not had one for quite a while, and I think that was maybe just more the local utility company. They just, with what's going on with COVID and different things, they just left.
Aren't shutting things off.
Told me when I contacted them, but yeah, of course it was winterized, so we had to have a plumber come out and de-winterize it. Agent has to be on site at that time, so the agent has to accompany the plumber to the house. They can't let the plumber go in on their own, and you want to do that anyway. You want to hang around for a little while after that gets de-winterized to make sure there's not some sort of a leak that maybe the plumber might not see right away, but a half hour later, all of a sudden it starts dripping or something. So
nice to have somebody there. There's no doubt. And I know you have horror stories, I'm sure, from other people all over the country who manage these, right?
Oh yeah. I had one in McFarland years ago that they actually de-winterized it. The buyers came, the inspector, they did a full 3-hour home inspection. Didn't find any leaks, nothing like that. A couple days later, agent stops in with the buyer, and something had a slow leak upstairs in a 2-story.
Oh,
and it leaked. Yeah, it leaked through the floor, leaked through the main floor, got the carpet wet in the living room, then leaked through that into the finished lower level. Part of the drywall fell in. Yeah, it was a big to-do, but just a random unlucky thing.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was. We still closed everything. Everything still went well in that particular situation. They did actually do a bit of an adjustment on the price based on the damage that happened, because it was something that happened while it was under contract.
So good question, and kind of in correspondence with that, but are HUD homes always vacant? Because it kind of sounds like maybe they are, or
Yeah, so HUD homes are always, when they're assigned to us, they are vacant. They've been trashed out. They're pretty much ready to go. There's usually not, or very small changes, if any, and that's if the preservation company comes out after it's assigned to us and maybe picks up some old paint cans or something that were in the basement, or mows the grass, or cuts the weeds that are a little too high, or this or that. That's typically done based on our inspections. If we recommend something, some little touch up that the preservation company should have done when they were out there the first time.
and then if I remember correctly from talks that you and I've had previously, sometimes just if there's a safety issue, they'll take care of that.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any sort of loose railings, is probably the biggest one. So if there's some railings, something electrical, potentially something sharp, like I've seen broken glass in the front yard where there was a window, a storm window that broke, and there were shards of glass in the front yard. I saw one recently actually where that happened. There was some broken shards. And you can see that too, where it's winter and then it warms up and the snow melts, and then all of a sudden stuff appears that you couldn't see before.
Sure.
So that's common.
Additional safety concerns or things with the roof, things like that, maybe. Yeah.
Yep. Not too many with the roof. More, the biggest one is the railing situation. And when they fix a railing or add a railing, people maybe think they come in and put in some, something to match, where it's an oak railing.
Not necessarily the case, huh?
Yeah, typically 2x4s. It's something to cure the safety issue, not something aesthetic.
I gotcha. I totally understand. Well, that being said, this kind of goes along. You're doing great with your answers, because they lead into my questions. Can you do a home inspection on a HUD home?
Yes. Yeah. So you can set up your home inspection just like you normally would. Just keep in mind that there aren't any repairs. No repairs are going to happen unless they are a safety hazard, which of course we just talked about. So if there's anything that comes up that, it's as is, it's an as is sale. It's for your own knowledge when you do a home inspection. So keep that in mind. You want to look at the home really well when you first go out. Obviously you're not, the buyer's not an inspector, the agent's not an inspector, but you do want to check it over as well as you can. And we also never have any knowledge of anything with the well and septic. So that's always a big mystery. No one looks at the well and septic. Occasionally you can find out something depending on if you've got a really friendly neighbor next door who may know something that happened with the well and septic because they talked to the previous owner. I've had this one happen several times lately, where the neighbor knew that the septic was failed. They talked to the previous owner and he said, yeah, the septic's failed and this and that. And they were right. A lot of times you can get
that being said, I think that's a good point for us to inject. If you are in these dealings and you are talking with a neighbor, maybe don't take everything the neighbor says as gospel either, because they may be inaccurate or wrong as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you have to kind of take it. You can't necessarily go and disclose something that the neighbors happen to say to you in passing. And sometimes too, what you can run into, if a neighbor maybe is interested in the property, sometimes they have a tendency to maybe exaggerate what might be wrong with it, thinking they're going to get, or something to that effect. I've seen that one a few times, but yeah, a lot of times it's just the other thing that happens too. I had one recently where I looked back at the previous condition report from about a year before, and it said it was failed. So that you can see that too if you look back sometimes and look at the history, and then you think, well, so he could have fixed it or could have remedied it, but typically while they're in foreclosure, probably not. So.
Well, that being said, so thank you for clarifying that. So a lot of people have that misinformation that they can't do that as is. It's a foreclosure. You got to take it, but that's not the case. You can do an inspection. So a good follow up then to that question is, will HUD make any repairs based on that inspection. I know you kind of covered that a little bit before, but go ahead.
Yeah, we covered that as far as so the only repairs they'll make is, of course, the safety hazard that we talked about.
Okay.
A situation like I talked about in McFarland, where you had something happen during the like since the offer was accepted and you signed your contract, somebody breaks in, for example. Let's say somebody breaks in and steals some copper pipes or whatever. I had that happen one time too, years ago. It was
I remember that when copper was really high. I couldn't believe that was a thing.
Yep.
But.
Yep. One of the few Milwaukee properties that I've sold, I had one where somebody broke in during the transaction and stole a bunch of pipes out of the property, and they did actually give a credit. So they gave a credit to the buyer because the buyer didn't sign up for a property without missing plumbing. So that would be an exception to that. Very rare does that happen. I don't want people to think that.
Right. Well, and actually that leads me into a follow-up question anyway. You're hitting on it.
Yeah.
We've covered that they're vacant. We've covered, that if stuff happens, obviously they're going to be able to still deal with it and talk about it. But does anyone maintain these HUD homes during the sale process, like while that's going on, or what's going on with that? Like, who's watching out for these places?
Yeah, so as agents, we're doing biweekly inspections. So we stop by, check them over to make sure nothing's crazy has happened or this or that, or someone broke something. Like I said, very rare. There is a company called Notion, who is the preservation company for the property. They're the ones that cut the grass. They winterize the property. They trash it out. They're responsible for any sort of maintenance things that are going on with the property. So they come out quite often and do their grass cuts and their snow removals and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they'll do some minor cleanup, touch-up type things. I've seen them where they've touched up some mold, maybe some mold or discoloration, as they call it, where there was some of that, and they'll come out and they're not doing a remediation. We don't want to call it that, but it's more of just a cleaning, just to kind of make it look a little bit better and make it so it doesn't really get out of control or anything. Because if you have mold sitting there for months, it continues to spread typically. So we don't see too many with mold. Occasionally we'll have one here and there, just like any house, I suppose.
Sure.
So is a company. They're national basically, and then they have their own subcontractors in different areas that they send out to do all this stuff. So there is somebody checking in on the properties and maintaining them, so that they aren't maintaining them like an owner would. Like they're not cutting the grass every 4 or 5 days in the summer. It's every 2 weeks. So, and it's a quick cut. They're not going around and trimming and making. They're not trimming.
They're not making it look pretty, right? So, well, that just so everybody knows too, we got a couple people that are obviously watching this live online. If you guys have any questions right now, feel free to, while we're still live, it says live on there. Go ahead and type a comment. And for that matter, even after we're done being live, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to type it into whatever you're watching on, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn. We're out on YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, which is Twitter, whatever. But if you have a question, feel free to type it in and we'll put it up here online for Jeff to answer. I got a couple more questions for you, Jeff, and then we can wrap things up if we don't have any questions, live questions. So how does HUD decide on the list price for these properties?
So what they do is once the property is assigned to us, then they have an appraiser come out. So it's an independent appraiser, and they come out and they do an FHA appraisal on the property. So they come up with a value, out of, just like any appraiser would. So So they come up, that's what the property's listed for. So there's not, they don't have 3 different opinions and combine them or anything. It's the FHA appraisal. They'll get a broker price opinion from us, but that is not what sets the price. The appraisal sets the price, and then we have some input typically within about 45 days of the listing, where we can say, hey, it's not selling. Here's my opinion. Let's lower the price to this. And sometimes the price will be lowered. A lot of them sell before that, though, of course. So
and you're hitting on it then. So pretty typical. I mean, other than like, a regular listing, a lot of times it's going to be a couple of realtors' professional opinions, maybe a seller's opinion and what they want to list it at. You guys are using a full-blown FHA appraisal to determine list price. That being said, my follow-up question to you would be, can you negotiate still on a HUD home? And does that happen often, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so basically, when you go onto HUD Home Store, you're going to place your bid. You're going to see the list price. You're going to place your bid, whatever you want. You can place any bid you want. Depending on what bid period that falls into, a lot of times it'll be the first 10 days is going to be a single bid period where they sit on the property for 10 days. It's only owner occupants. And then,
and to clarify, Jeff, and to clarify really quick, who can bid? Because it's not just, you can't just be a Joe Blow off the street. You do need to have a licensed real estate professional help you put in this bid. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. You got to have an agent do it, and you have to have an agent that has a NAID number. So, or I should say, the broker of that agent has to have a NAID number. So, for instance,
a NAID number, NAID, right? NAID number.
Yep. And you plug that in. You can't log in without it. So you log in with that and your realtor license. You go in, you place your bid. It's really easy to place your bid. It's super simple. It's more simple than a WB form, basically. So you go in and you place your bid. You put in your closing costs, stuff like that. It's very basic.
I can say from personal experience, it's a lot cooler now than it was 10 years ago. So from that standpoint, it's a very painless process comparatively to what it used to be. So
yeah, with the DocuSign, with completing the documents by DocuSign, because it used to be where you'd print out a pile of paperwork about 20 some pages, sit down with a blue pen and fill everything out by hand. All sorts of errors, because they were very, very picky at that time as well. So you'd have all sorts of errors. We'd have to usually do it 2 or 3 times, where now it's just foolproof. The HUD sets it up for you and you just click, just DocuSign. So
excellent. Yeah.
So.
Well,
yeah.
Cool. That's all the questions I have for you this week. Thank you so much. I know there's a wealth of information here. If anybody's watching this over the next month, we do this monthly on the channel that you're watching it on, and we advertise it out. We are in the state of Wisconsin. There are HUD reps in your state. Certainly reach out to us. Jeff's information will be down here in the comments below. You can contact him via telephone. You can email him. You can send him smoke signals. I think he'll answer to just about anything. Very receptive. That being said, if you're in another state and you're not in Wisconsin, he can certainly probably help direct you to your agent. But otherwise, that's something you can ask your agent. Say, hey, I'm looking. I want to look at a HUD home. I did want to point out one last thing before we go. And if anybody has, again, if you have any questions, even if it's not right now live and you want to type your questions, we'll get back to you and answer them for next month, or we'll send you an email. If you want to send us a private message with your email, don't post your email in the comments section. You'll get blown up by a bunch of real estate professionals. Just an FYI, reach out to us directly or send us a private message. But from that standpoint, I want to direct and make sure. The one thing that hit me today that was like a really good nugget that you gave was, when there's a sign out and it says a HUD home, it may not be listed as active anymore because it's still in pending. And that is something too, where if you go to HUD Home Store and you're sitting out in front of a listing that's a HUD listing and it's no longer on HUD Home Store, one of 2 things could be true. Either it's not all the way into HUD Home Store yet, it's in process, right? The sign just got put up that day and it could be coming on any day, or it's pending a sale and it's on its way to a closing. So is there a rule of thumb there? Do you typically want an agent to wait a day before they call you when they see a sign, or just have them reach out to you?
No, I'd say reach out right away. And typically I don't. So when I put the sign up is the day that they send me the listing contract. So that means it's going on that day. So it's either that day or the next morning, and typically that day. And then I'll run out, I'll put the sign up. And also too, the signs will always have, they'll have HUD Home Store on there. And then we put also a flyer. It's kind of, it's a sign basically in the window as well. So you can kind of recognize a HUD home. It'll have that rider on the bottom of the sign that says www.hudhomestore.com. So it's pretty easy. If it does not have that, then we maybe had a windstorm or something that knocked it off or this or that, because we have to put that on the sign and take a photo of it proving that it's on there. So
but that placard's usually right in the little side light window or on the door or whatever as well. Yeah.
It'll fit. We have I have a laminated, it's about I don't know, 16 by 24 sign that goes in the window. And then also the rider that goes right on the sign itself. So those two things are there. So you can always recognize them. Yeah. So, and just call us anytime. But if you see the sign, if you see the sign, you don't see it on HUD Home Store, most of the time it's going to be because it's dropped off of there because a bid was accepted.
Okay.
So drop it off there even before the contracts are signed. So as soon as it's accepted, it disappears on there, because a lot of times I'll get a call from an agent and say, hey, what happened to that? It was on there last night. Now I don't see it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, bid was probably accepted. Now, there is a little quirk that I've seen, and we've not figured out what it is, but occasionally it'll drop off the site for a little while, then it'll pop back up. And I don't know if it's just some inner workings of the website or something. We have not figured out why that happens, but maybe it's updating or something, but it'll drop off for a little bit, a few hours, and then all of a sudden it's back up. And nothing was accepted. It's just kind of a little website.
Quirky. So with that being said, when in doubt, feel free to reach out to you and check status on if it's for sale or anything. Last call for questions out there in internet land. I know that it looks like there's still several of you online watching. If you have a quick question, hit the comments button. Otherwise, I think we're going to be cutting it off here in about 10 seconds.
Yep,
8,
yep,
6, 5, 4. No live questions this week. Hey, we had 2 last week and none this week, so that's all good.
People can call me or text me too afterwards if they don't want to be doing it while we're online. Just shoot me a private message, and yeah, always available. So
okay, sounds wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. We'll see you again next month. Appreciate it very much.
Dan, really appreciate it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.